I'm prepared to wait for my answer until hell freezes over, if that's your decision.
Accusations, denials, and deceptions, all playing a key role in the Cuban Missile Crisis, which may have been the most dangerous event in the history of the entire world.
When World War II came to an end, we were left with two superpowers, the Soviet Union and the United States. These two superpowers were then plunged into constant tension, of which examples are the Korean War, the Middle East Crisis, and perhaps the most pivotal, the Berlin Crisis. All these crises, as well as the arms race, were all summed up into one war, the Cold War, which both sides had the power to destroy each other with thermonuclear weapons, but both sides did not want that to happen. The Cold War was a clash of beliefs, the Soviet Union with communism, and the West with capitalism. And from President Kennedy's speech, we know that he would never let communism invade the Western Hemisphere.
That we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
This clash of beliefs and the spreading of communism led to a very special mindset in the United States. In 1960, Americans were petrified of the spread of communism, and this played a key role in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Spring, 1962. Khrushchev and his Minister of Defense, Malinowski, are on the beaches of the Soviet Union. Topic of discussion, Jupiter missiles in Turkey. Turkey is just south of the Soviet Union, and therefore missiles there is considered a big threat. And Khrushchev wanted to do something about this, but he didn't have a piece of land close to the United States, until we gave Cuba to the Soviet bloc. The missiles in Turkey were actually considered to be clunkers. As Robert McNamara basically states, anyone can disarm them by shooting at them with a gun from an adjacent highway. The fact that these missiles were clunkers played a key role when we came to terms with the Soviet Union on the 27th of October. Khrushchev wasn't only worried about our missiles in Turkey, we also had bombers as well as intercontinental ballistic missiles, and Khrushchev had to do something about this missile imbalance. April 17th, 1961. The United States launches the Bay of Pigs invasion. Fidel Castro was the current leader of Cuba, and he, like his soon-to-be fellow Soviet Union, had communistic views. This is where our fear of communism comes into play. Cuba was only 90 miles away, and that means communism was also only 90 miles away. The United States government needed to counteract Castro and his communistic views. We trained Cuban exiles for the Bay of Pigs invasion, and we also severed our diplomatic and economic ties with Cuba. The Bay of Pigs invasion angered Castro, so he joins the Soviet bloc. This is a prime opportunity for the Soviet Union. Cuba, which is very deep in enemy territory, is now part of the Soviet bloc, and that means Khrushchev can place missiles there. These missiles will balance the missile status quo, but unbeknownst to Khrushchev, these missiles will bring us closest to nuclear devastation than we have ever came. Khrushchev's plan was initiated in mid-1962.
He would deploy missiles to his new foothold in the northwest hemisphere, Cuba. The missiles would not only protect Cuba, but also balance the missile status quo.
This will be the greatest military movement at that time. They will attempt to move 40,000 men and 60 nuclear missiles to an island 8,000 miles away in only 4 months, while keeping it all a secret.
The Soviet denial and deception efforts were of high use in this missile movement. They codenamed this operation Anadyr, which is a cold Russian city. The ships were modified to hide the missiles, and everything on land was carried out in the dark.
The putting of missiles in Cuba was more than what it seems. It was really a diplomatic move, as explained by Khrushchev's son, Sergei Khrushchev.
So Khrushchev decided to send missiles there as the diplomatic signal. Don't invade Cuba, we are serious.
Despite of the Soviets' best efforts to keep Operation Anadyr secret, on August 10, 1962, CIA Director John McCone sent a memo to President Kennedy of a possibility for there to be missiles in Cuba. On October 14, 1964, a U-2 overflight discovers evidence of missile sites in Cuba. On October 15, 1962, a team of film specialists discovered medium-range ballistic missile sites in Cuba that resembled MRBM sites in the Soviet Union.
On October 16th, with President Kennedy knowing about the missile sites, he called a meeting with his advisors. This group of people came to be known as the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, or more commonly known as EXCOM.
These meetings were an example of debate on the United States side. They had four options: do nothing, attack, start a quarantine, or apply diplomatic pressure.
Following the meeting on October 17th, the U-2 flights revealed evidence of SS-5 intermediate-range nuclear missiles. At the meeting, there was a lot of pressure for an airstrike, especially from the Air Force representatives.
After Kennedy obtained the photos, Kennedy called a meeting with Gromyko, the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs. Gromyko assured Kennedy that Soviet aid to Cuba is defensive and denied ballistic missiles.
Since an airstrike could not guarantee the destruction of all the missiles in Cuba, President Kennedy ordered a naval quarantine for the time being that would stop the flow of Soviet supplies into Cuba.
With the Organization of American States supporting the blockade and no response from Khrushchev, President Kennedy orders the blockade line to go from 800 miles to 500 miles from Cuba's shore. Also, on the 24th, America is now at DEFCON 2, the highest in ever U.S. history.
On the 25th of October, before the United Nations Security Council, U.S. Ambassador Adlai Stevenson asked the Soviet ambassador if there were missiles in Cuba. When he refused to answer, Adlai Stevenson not only showed the Council evidence of missiles, but said the most famous quote in United Nations history.
I'm prepared to wait for my answer until hell freezes over, if that's your decision. And I'm also prepared to present the evidence.
October 26. Moscow sends a letter to the United States. This letter requests that, for the removal of the missiles in Cuba, the United States will lift the naval quarantine around Cuba and publicly pledge never to invade Cuba. On October 27th, an American U-2 spy plane was shot down against standing orders from Moscow. On that same day, the White House receives yet another letter from the Soviet Union, this time much more demanding. It demands that in exchange for the removal of the missiles in Cuba, the missiles in Turkey also be removed. The fate of the world now rests in President Kennedy's hands. He must make a decision that makes the West look strong, the Soviets look weak, and at all cost, avoid nuclear devastation. The president now communes with his brother, Robert F. Kennedy. They come up with a plan that, if accepted, will make the Soviets look weak, the Western world look strong, and stop nuclear war. Robert F. Kennedy meets with the Russian ambassador Anatoly Dobrynin to make a secret deal. The United States complies with the three demands made in the second letter. They will lift the naval blockade around Cuba, they will publicly pledge never to invade Cuba, and they will also take the missiles out of Turkey. On the Soviet side, they will remove the missiles from Cuba under UN supervision. But also they must keep the Turkish missiles a secret. They are not allowed to recognize the missiles as an official part of the deal. This is very important because it makes the Soviet Union look weak. It makes the West look strong.
On October 28, 1962, over Radio Moscow, Premier Khrushchev declares that he will remove the missiles from Cuba, ending the Cuban Missile Crisis.
As we look back upon the Cuban Missile Crisis, who was it really a success for, the Soviet Union or America? And what about Cuba? Did they succeed or did they fail?
The crisis was also an overall success for the world when we all avoided a nuclear war. And at the time, it was an immediate success for the United States because the public did not know about the removal of the missiles in Turkey. It made the Soviet Union seem weak.
This view of the Soviet Union brought shame upon them, and ultimately led to the overpowering of Khrushchev in 1964.
In the end, however, it seems that both sides won and lost, as the United States did give up its base in Turkey. And Cuba, while not having a hand in the crisis, ultimately failed when a major ally left them and still having broken ties with America.
And for the Soviet Union, although they succeeded in protecting one of their allies, they also failed in the fact that they were still behind in the missile status quo. The consequences of the Cuban Missile Crisis, however, are quite profound.
During the crisis, the diplomatic relations between the United States and the Soviet Union were strained. But because of how close the world came to an end, the consequences was the ties were actually strengthened between the two superpowers, because the superpowers wanted to avoid another crisis.
The Cuban Missile Crisis is a true example of how a few misunderstandings, vengeance, and jealousy can lead the world to the brink of nuclear devastation.